Every era has its defining transformation. Ours is the rise of intelligence, where data connects the world and AI reshapes every decision we make. But as machines grow smarter, it's our humanity that must grow stronger, because technology doesn't define progress. Leadership does.
WILDA is the world's premier forum for leadership in AI, bringing together global executives and industry pioneers to shape a fair digital world through collaboration, knowledge exchange, and thought leadership in data, digital, and AI. We believe the future of AI must be guided by empathy, ethics, and inclusion, where every algorithm reflects fairness and every leader drives impact with integrity. From New York to Singapore, from boardrooms to innovation labs, WILDA brings together the world's most forward-thinking leaders to share ideas, challenge boundaries, and turn possibility into progress. We build communities that empower. We create conversations that spark action. We lead with conscience, collaboration, and courage. The future isn't written by algorithms. It is shaped by people who choose to lead differently. People who combine intelligence with compassion, innovation with integrity, and data with purpose. We are the world leaders in data and AI. Together, we are designing a world that is intelligent, inclusive, and deeply human.
Welcome. You're watching the AI Talk Show. I'm Asha Saxena, and this is where AI gets real. Every episode, one guest, one honest conversation, and it's about what's working, what's not working, and what's coming next. Today's conversation sits at an intersection of most people haven't really figured out yet. It's all about artificial intelligence, yes, but also about cybersecurity. It's not an abstract concept anymore. We're living in a very high-stake operations inside the large organization. And today, my guest has over 20 years of experience in this space. He started as a researcher, went deep into consulting, led products, and now runs AI engineering organization within IBM Cybersecurity Services. Dr. Mehbood Tavali, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Asha. It's great to be here.
Before we get started, I want to talk about the fact, Mehbood, that you've spent the last 20 years in cybersecurity, starting as a researcher during your PhD at University of New Brunswick, then consulting at Deloitte, and then IBM. And then you were a product management, and now you're leading AI engineering team. Looking across the whole arc, how are you thinking about security evolved, and what specifically drew you towards AI?
Yeah, awesome. Great question. Let me give you a little bit background about myself, and then I get back to your question.
Yes.
So going back, I started my background in software engineering. And when I got into my master's program, I got very interested in both cybersecurity and AI. These were the topics back in the days, very hot. Everyone very excited about them. And when I wanted to start my PhD and I was thinking about my PhD thesis, I wasn't really sure which way to go. So eventually I decided to focus on cybersecurity, but leveraging AI to solve those problems in cybersecurity. And there was a specific reason I picked that option. I realized over time that cybersecurity problems are more difficult to solve compared to some of the classic AI problems that we have. And if I want to give you an example, a good classic example of AI would be book recommendation or classification of documents. So if you think about Amazon and the way they do book recommendations, is that you may buy a book from Amazon, and based on that, Amazon will look at your profile and recommend more books. And the idea here is that they give you more recommendations, and hopefully you click on more links and you buy more books from them, and that will increase the revenue. But let's imagine that we build a solution for that, and the accuracy of that solution is 80%. That means in 80% of the cases, we have a good recommendation for the user. Most likely the user will click on it, like it, and buy that book. But what if we do it wrong? Nothing happens, right? We just go with the wrong recommendation. The user will look at it, they lose their interest, and they move on. But if you think about the same example in cybersecurity, 80% doesn't get us anywhere. No one is happy with 80%. I would say that even if you go with 99% accuracy in cybersecurity, that's not an acceptable solution. So that type of nature in cybersecurity makes it very, very exciting and makes it a very, very difficult problem to solve. And that was my motivation when I started my PhD. I was focused on finding the threats using machine learning techniques. And that was the result of my PhD over the 3 years. But one thing I realized at the end of it was that, and this is when about 2010, when I finished my PhD, I realized that the AI was not ready for the use cases I had. AI was still not mature enough. It wasn't powerful enough. The compute was a big problem. And I realized that the solution was great. It was a real problem, but it was not the right time to solve that problem. And soon after that, I decided to join Deloitte as a consultant and kind of move to something that is more realistic and move to problems that I can easily solve. And from there, it was just a kind of, a natural step of going to the next level in my career. I was a consultant for a long time, and then I realized that with consulting, I can only make an impact in one client. But if I want to have a major impact across multiple clients, I have to start building products. And that got me into product management. And then a couple of years ago, I moved to the engineering team to have more impact on our teams and the products that we build for our clients.
What a great journey. I mean, really think about as a researcher, it gives you so much depth into you to really going deep into your technology or problem you're trying to solve. But when you think about engineering team, I mean, from product to engineering, it's a leap from one, way of working to a different way of working. Going from researcher to running a large engineering team now, probably is a completely different skill set. What surprised you the most when you're thinking about that kind of shift? And I'm sure the listeners who are listening are probably even thinking about shifting. What do you think is important for them to think about what are the skills and what is a shift that's required?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a major shift. Of course, for me, it happened over time, so I had time to adapt to it. But if I go back and compare research organizations and the way I used to do research with engineering, there are a lot of changes, differences between the two. I would say when you focus on research, it used to be a very small team and everyone thinking same direction. Usually you have a group of like master PhD students focus on research. And any decision you make doesn't really have a major impact on the production environment. So there's not much risk. You can take as much risk as you want. You can make decisions. You can switch and turn your directions and start doing something from scratch. But when you look at the engineering team and when you are dealing with production environments, you don't have that flexibility. It's hard to make dramatic changes. You can make slow changes and introduce slow changes to the team, but dramatic changes usually doesn't work with the engineering team. And of course, the risks are much higher, right? Making a minor mistake within engineering and production system may cause a lot of issues with clients, losing revenue, and requires patience. So I would say the biggest difference for me is just, the patience that I grew over time to be more patient with my team when we work at the engineering team. It's all about minor changes in the right direction rather than major changes in a short period of time.
I agree with you. I think especially when you're in a design time of the engineering, it is so important to take those small wins, to make sure that you're not losing patience and not doing major, mistakes. And because every little mistake can cause a lot of turmoil. So just creating those small wins as you go along. But when you talk about cybersecurity, in the cybersecurity world, before we even jump into AI, the cybersecurity fabric, a lot of CIOs or CISOs, I would say, are drowning into different tools. You might have a CISO might have 15 different tools, which is in practice, and you've deployed these tools. They're not talking to each other. They're not integrated, and that becomes a huge challenge for organization because they have to look at which tool does what and why it's not integrated at all. How do you deal with organizations when you're working with them or consulting with them, and what problems do you really see, and how should they be thinking about solving that big challenge?
Great question. Let me start with a very simple example that everyone, all of your audience can relate with. Imagine that we have a big mansion and we want to make it secure. So we may start with deploying different cameras in different places. We may put sensors in the gate and different doors, windows, and so on, right? And if it's a mansion, we may have 100 cameras and 500 sensors and so on. Now imagine that each of these sensors and cameras, the moment they detect a change, they will send you an alert on your app or your email. Very quickly with that system, you end up getting hundreds of emails in your mailbox, and you don't really know how important they are, whether they're false positives or not.
Yeah.
And it makes a chaos, right? How to deal with that, that becomes a problem on its own. Now imagine that your system can bring everything together. It can detect the cameras and motion sensors and everything else, brings everything together and tells you a story that, oh, I noticed this person went through the gate, they opened the gate, they went through the back door, they opened the back door, they got into the room and they went into the basement, they opened the safe box, and they stole this, right? So this entire thing, maybe thousands of alerts here, can become one incident with an end-to-end story. So you know how it happened, what is stolen, and based on that, you can react to it. And this is very, very important in security, because in security, breaches happen anyway,
Yes.
whether we like it or not. But when it happens, it's very important to know how it happened, who got in, and what was the impact. And bringing everything together gives us that insight. Now, if I want to bring it to the cybersecurity, bring that example to cybersecurity, we have the same problem. We have organizations running different products within their environment, average of 15 different products. And each of these products work on their own. They generate their own alerts, and they're not integrated with each other. So you get into the same situation where you're getting all these alerts. You don't see the entire story. You don't have full visibility. And it takes a lot of time bringing everything together. And this is becoming more and more important because in the age of AI, speed is also an important factor. So you don't have a lot of time to bring the pieces together. You need an AI system to bring everything together, present you the final outcome, and then based on that, you can make a decision.
And you talk about pre-AI, cybersecurity was a challenge, just attacks, the phishing attacks. In general, cybersecurity was a critical piece in any organization. And now you think about AI coming into play. I mean, anywhere I'm going and speaking, the first question people are asking is the new attacks. We don't even know the kind of attacks that are going to happen in this world of AI. And you took the engineering team in 2022, and then ChatGPT launched right at the end of 2022. I think a few months later. And I'm just thinking what was going through your mind that now you're just taking this new role, and you have this new entity, ChatGPT, that's launching the large language model, and the world is just going to open up with all the kind of different challenges the cybersecurity team has to face. What were you actually thinking?
Yeah, great question. I would say, ChatGPT was a surprise for a lot of people who were involved in the AI evolution. If I want to go back to 20 years ago, again, when early days of my involvement in AI, everybody was thinking of AI as something that can build robots, can do some automation, it can classify documents and things like that. But we're always thinking that when it comes to innovation, it's people who are in computer science and the innovators, they're the ones building these robots, building these programs, telling the robots what to do and so on. So that was our expectation. But what happened with ChatGPT was that instead of seeing a new version of a robot that can do more stuff or kind of some autonomous driving and things like that, with ChatGPT, we saw a model, an AI, it was really good with programming languages and languages in general, which was a difficult problem to solve. No one thought that you can have an AI that works as clear as a human being. And
Right.
then when you take that ChatGPT concept into programming, it just revolutionized everything we have in software programming. I would say everyone caught off guard by that because people were thinking that programming is always a skill required to build the AI, but no one thought that the AI can build their own programs to run the AIs and
That's
so on.
right.
So that was a very, very surprising factor to me. But I would say the exciting part with ChatGPT and AI for me was that I mentioned about my research about back in 2010, 2009, and the lack of compute and the problems that I couldn't solve at the time. I would say now with the compute that we have and with the involvement of AI, those problems are easy to solve. And that part gets me really excited because I had, like, if I think about like 15, 20 years ago, I had a lot of ideas. It was just ideas. I had no way of implementing them. But now a lot of those ideas become a reality. And with AI, I can implement them in a much faster pace, right? So instead of spending millions of dollars into an idea to see whether it works or not, we can all vibe code and we can all bring a POC together with a small amount of time and budget and see how it goes. And if it just, kicks off, then we can spend more money and more time in it. And if it's not a good idea, then very soon we realize that the idea is not great, and maybe we have to move on to something else.
When you talk about vibe coding, I think that is such a game changer because the non-technical teams can now vibe code and create something that can be, build a prototype before they actually launch. And it really gives a lot of freedom, freedom to innovate, freedom to experiment at a very quick pace. You don't have to really spend months and months building your pilot. You can actually build it pretty quickly to actually, figure out the funding, resources, and so on. So I agree with you that the AI is changing the game. But when you think about change, I think change is hard. And also, you have this traditional engineering team who are now moving into this AI native products. What is the hardest part for you to move this traditional engineering team building AI native products, and specifically when things starts breaking?
Yeah, and I would say that's one of the most difficult problem across all the engineering teams in every organization. So, if I again, if you want to think about software engineering and how we build these engineering teams, usually a lot of ideas in software engineering happens. It starts with a small group of people, very innovative people. They can take risks, they can come up with new ideas and so on. So usually you have startups, a small group of people, they come up with the idea, they build the idea, they start signing up more and more customers. And as they sign up more customers, they need to scale up their team. So they hire more people in their engineering team. But the people they hire, most of those people are people who can bring stability and scalability to the system. So the new people get added to that organization usually are not the innovators. They're the ones who can scale the system and make the system very stable. Because at some point, when your system is so big and you have so many customers, you cannot take any risk at all. And the behavior gets changed. And when we look at a lot of our engineering organizations, a big portion of the team, I would say maybe more than 70% of the team, are the people who are focused on the stability and scalability of the system versus innovation. And AI is changing that pattern because AI is automating a lot of the work when it comes to maintaining the applications and bringing, making the application stable. So as we move along with AI, we will see that we need more and more builders compared to maintainers. And that's a huge shift in engineering departments because that requires a culture shift. That also requires a shift of resources and bringing more people who can innovate instead of people who can maintain. I would say it requires time, it requires patience. It's not something that people can do over the couple of weeks. And in some cases, in larger organizations, it may take years to bring that culture shift to the entire team.
That culture shift is everywhere. And, when you think about, when we move from legacy to digital now to AI, the culture shift is, I think, the hardest for any organization. I've spoken to some senior leaders who talk about that their senior architects refuse to use AI because they feel that they can produce better product. And a lot of technical leaders are thinking about not, and programmers, worried about their jobs being gone. So I think the change is hard, and that's why giving the comfort to the team, saying that, this tool is just a complement. not replacement. And I think it's a lot of, building that trust around the processes that is important. And we've been talking about the whole shift in AI in organization is that the organizations are going to move from task-based to output-based. So if you're thinking about the output can be produced by human or an agent. So you can actually work with AI as a partner instead of worrying about it taking your job. But when you really think about AI is also accelerating in phishing, right? Automated vulnerability scanning, AI can help you with, AI can generate malware variant. When you start thinking about what AI can do, what is your defense when you're thinking about the attackers are using AI also? And this arm race of this, attacks to the enterprises, especially from where you're sitting, what does it look like? What are the actual gaps between how fast these threats are evolving? Because they are with technology. You don't even know what new release is coming and what threat you could have, and how fast these enterprise security teams are respond or potentially can respond to. So there's a little gap. What do you see, and how do you see that these enterprises can actually get to a place where they can actually keep up?
Right. And I think when we look at AI and cybersecurity, there are two major areas where AI is changing the way we used to do things. One is the attack surface. So if you go back to the older days, we used to have just some servers connected to the internet, and the job of cybersecurity was to protect those servers. And then over time, we had more endpoints, laptops connected to the internet. Then we had the cell phones. Then COVID hit and everyone went remote. Now we have more. And now with AI, that's also changing. Now you also have AI agents running everywhere, and that will increase the attack surface. That means like there are more areas where the attackers can penetrate and get into the organization, and from there they can pivot and get access to different assets and so on. So that's one major shift that we see. AI is dramatically increasing that attack surface. The other thing is that in terms of fundamentals of security, everything stays the same, but AI has accelerated everything and AI has increased the quality. So if you look at social engineering, we all used to get these emails that were so obvious that these are social engineering coming from someone like outside of North America. It was obvious that the person who's written that email is not a native English
That's
speaker and so
exactly.
on. With AI, these things are not easy to detect. And then if you think about deepfake audio and video, it's very, very difficult to detect those things. So anyone will fall into those traps. So that's one thing, right? So and AI is helping with the quality of social engineering. Basically, the attacks are going to be more and more effective going forward as a result of AI. And then the other area is the pace. So if you think about vulnerabilities, vulnerabilities into the products used to take a lot of time, right? We used to have a lot of big research teams. They had to look at the software. They look at different parts of the code to find a hole into the software. And then once they could find a hole, they had to write a malware to kind of exploit that thing and so on. And this used to take a lot time. For attackers, used to take months. Same thing for the defenders. It used to take months or years to kind of come up with these things. AI has changed that into a couple of hours. So in a couple of hours, you can scan the entire code, you can find the holes in the code, and then AI can write the malware, and AI can also morph the malware. So if the malware is getting detected by a lot of detection tools or endpoint detection tools in the market, AI can change the code so it can bypass the signature. So that's a major shift. And all that
Craziness,
means
though.
is that in the defense side, you need to be faster. You need to bring more integration together so you can see the bigger picture and the full picture. And then you need all of that data to find the context and measure the impact on the organization and prioritize the important things, because there might be some alerts that they're random, there might be false positives, but you want to make sure that your team is focusing on the meaningful incidents that are kind of basically having a major impact on the organization.
I agree with you on the integration. If you don't see the whole picture, it's very hard to see where the things are breaking, So integration has to be a priority for organization. But when you think about the AI evolving, it's like AI is evolving and there can be new threat, but you could also use AI to help protect those threats. But if you had 60 seconds with a CISO, at a major bank right now. One thing you'd tell them to do differently in next 12 months, what would that be?
Great question. So I would say first thing would be no more spending money on the shiny tools and new tools. Spend more time on integration. And I would say instead of instead of infusing AI into the existing roadmap and existing processes, it's better to redesign the processes that we have. So I would say, it's better to focus on a few processes that are part of core processes, and we gain a lot of productivity. And we redesign those processes and infuse AI into that. That usually gives organization the highest productivity. That will release a lot of resources, and then those people can work on some other issues and challenges we have in the organization.
I think that's great, because I think a lot of times they say instead of automating and using AI to what's not working doesn't help. You need to make sure that you rethink about your processes, redesign them to make it more effective, and then use a technology like powerful technology like AI to automate or make sense of it. You've been in this space for 20 years, Mehboob. You've watched the threats evolve. Your team has evolved, the tools have evolved. What still genuinely excites you about where you're going?
Yeah, I would say, when I think about AI, just reminds me of YouTube and how it changed the education and democratized everything. So, if you go back to 34 years ago, 30, 40 years ago, people had to go to good universities, have the best professors, instructors, learn everything there. And not everyone had access to it. And YouTube kind of democratized that education. Now, these days, you just need internet access and YouTube, and you can learn anything you want. I would say AI is doing the same thing with the builders. These days, you don't need to have a budget. You don't need to be a specific location. You don't need to be in a Bay Area to be innovative and raise funding and so on. By leveraging AI, anyone can become a builder, and anyone has access to it. So that gets me really excited, because it just, I guess the barrier to run a startup is just getting reduced, and that means more innovation will come, and that means anyone anywhere in the world can innovate, and that gets me really excited.
As we talk about AI evolving and AI being able to create impact on your strategy, your growth, your operations, creating efficiencies, expanding your market share, it also have to be we also have to be cautious about how it's impacting our risk and security and governance. And it's important to remember that it has the two sides of the story: the growth, the happy, the positive, but also cautious, and making sure that we're putting the guardrails and governance around our data and security around our data and the quality around the data. I think, remember, what really stuck with me through this conversation is that we need to look at our systems. We need to build that one story that tells us where the gaps are when somebody walks into where they're going to, what they're saying. So building our solutions, our softwares into one story. The second thing which you spoke about, after the integration, is really looking at the repurposing, reprocessing your processes, re-engineering your processes, rethinking about, are they the optimal, are they the right processes that we need? And lastly, prioritization, where do you put the priority? I think that becomes really, really critical. Really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much for coming. This is a wrap. One conversation, one step closer to AI being right. Thank you for joining us, Mehboob. And thank you everyone for joining us. I'm Asha Saxena. I'll see you next time in next episode.
Thank you so much.